Not easy getting those kids ready in such a short amount of time, so I'm very thankful for the staff. Why don't you thank Miss Sandy and the gang? Thank you, teachers, for getting that ready. Listen, before I share a little bit of God's Word with you, I want to talk about what it means to be a church called Hope. And I'm no surprise to anybody, all the things that are happening around the world and our communities and the islands that have been just devastated this last week from the last hurricane that just went through, Puerto Rico and Dominica and St. Martin, St. Thomas. I talked about some of the names of the communities and islands that have been, just flattened, devastated, lights out. It's tremendous amount of suffering that's out there. And then you think about what's happening in Mexico, where they had another devastating earthquake and two more this morning. West of here in Immokalee and all the towns that also experienced the trauma of a major hurricane, they're hurting. And south of us as well, in the Keys, where the hurricane blasted through as a Category 5, and we've lost 10,000 homes in the Keys. That's a lot of pain around us, surrounding us. So when I met with you guys back in August, many of the parents, and I talk about this message on Sundays a lot, is, to call yourself a place of hope means you have to respond and offer hope to people who are in need and hurting. So next Sunday, we are going to take a team of people leaving the church early in the morning about, I'm going to say 6:30, but the reality is we'll leave at 7. We're leaving at 6:30, but it's really going to be 7. To go down to Marathon and share the gospel in a meaningful way. We're going to spend the day helping families that are a lot worse off than we are. And isn't that true, though, that down in that area, those folks are really, really hurting? So bright and early in the morning, we're going to leave from here and spend the day, first start worshiping and kind of getting our hearts in the right place, offering hope to a community that right now is worshiping with another church from another denomination. Assemblies of God are worshiping with the church that we're going to go to because their church is gone, got wiped out. So it's a way to really live out what it means to be a Christian, our sharing time with that community down there, because they're scattered. And I imagine if you were feeling uncomfortable this last couple of weeks and stressed out, imagine if 10,000 of your homes are just simply gone. And how many of you have thought and wondered what would have happened if by just a little bit that hurricane would have come through Miami? We would know pain. That would be amazing in a very negative way. So yeah, we're going to drive down there together. And I want to encourage you to come with us. And it's a trip, though, that's meant for people that are able to work. It's going to be a day of lifting and cutting and just exactly what you've been doing around here. Right? It's nothing new. You're all well prepared for this. But it is a day that's going to take some energy and a lot of sweat and a lot of love equity to be successful with. But here it is. I talked to you about what it means to be a volunteer at this church, what it means to be a part of this congregation, and as preschool parents, you're a part of this congregation. We spend a lot of time with your kids, and here's a lesson they need to hear, a lesson they need to visibly see. Mom or dad or older brothers and siblings who are capable to help will go and lend a hand to other people that are struggling. It helps to change your life and change the dynamics of your family. It's leading by example. And I hope that you hear this call on your heart to do something to make a difference. Now, I know everybody can't go, and not everybody should go. If you're not physically up to it, don't even think about it. It's not the most important thing you'll do, because you can do other things as well. But if you're able, I want you to think about being here at 6:30, which I really mean 7, and we'll leave, though, at 7 for sure. And come and join us. And if you need a ride, get a hold of the church office here. You could share it with Miss Sandy as well. She would be more than happy to capture that information and say, I'd like to go, but I can't get down there. Okay, well, we're going to have some limited ability to help people, but we'll need a head count to do that. What about supplies? Can we offer that? Well, it's interesting. They actually have a fair amount of supplies. That isn't our call. But what they don't have is enough capable hands to pick up the trees, to pick up the mess that's there, and to help people. So that's what our calling will be, and that's part of the journey that we're going to be taking. Now, if you think that's a good idea that we, a church called Hope, would do, why don't you just shout out amen? Amen. Yeah, that's what we're going to do next Sunday. We'll still have services here, but for those who are capable and able, come and join us, okay? I want to do that. Now, I want to turn to looking at ourselves a little bit this morning. I'm going to start with sharing a story from a very funny pastor by the name of Billy Strayhorn. I've read a lot of his material, and he's a pretty funny guy. And he offers this really neat story about his own childhood. When he was a little guy, he had a brother named Scott. And Scott was, like many siblings, always getting himself into hot water. And one time, Scott was downstairs in their basement. In Florida, we don't have basements, but in the rest of the world, they have basements. Okay, so he was down in the basement playing a game of some kind, and his dad, it was dinner time, and so his dad yells out to him, Scott, come on, it's time to eat, comida, let's go, vámonos. And Scott doesn't come up. Never happened to you, right? Your kids listen to you, everything you tell them, no doubt. So he yells again down there, Scott, come on, let's go. Vámonos, it's time to eat, let's go. Silence, nothing. Scott doesn't come. I don't know about you, but after the second time, I get a little irritated with my kids when they're not listening. So just like me, Dad raises his voice and he yells, Scott, get up here right now. It's time to eat. And Scott finally responds and gets to the bottom of the stairs, and his dad just rips into him. Why didn't you come when I called you the other 2 times? And Scott just looks at him and said, well, I didn't hear you those other 2 times. Now, I just blew my own joke. I told her earlier and I got it right. See, forget it. It was funny the first time, and I messed it up, which is not unusual for me, actually. See, Dad didn't say it was 2 times. I added that part in there, and that screwed up the joke. But you know what? That ain't funny, but neither is a lack of communication in your homes. That ain't funny either. And every family struggles that. Isn't that true, though? In your families, a lot of times you're talking past each other, or a lot of times you don't communicate at all. You just don't have anything to say to each other. And when we don't communicate, it's one of the things that can cause real problems within a family. Major problems. And for some people, a lack of communication or miscommunication can actually make a family, help contribute to a family becoming dysfunctional. That's a serious, serious place for a family to be. That's not the only thing. A lack of trust, abuse, whether it's verbal or physical, addictions or problems in families, leading to all kinds of different problems in the dynamics of a healthy family. Just destroys it, all those things. But this problem of dysfunction in families has been going on since literally the beginning of history. In fact, one of the things that the Bible does, it captures and documents all the different things that have gone wrong in families over the years, and starting with the very first family. Y'all have heard the story of Adam and Eve, right? Well, their sons were Cain and Abel. And what happened to Cain and Abel? Good things or bad things? Bad things. Very bad things. Cain tries to actually kills his brother Abel. Is that dysfunctional or what? Doesn't get much worse than that. And other stories that are captured in the Bible, like Moses had a major anger problem. And King David killed and murdered the husband of a woman that he was having an adulterous relationship with. I mean, over and over again, you're going to get stories like Jacob, who was a perennial liar and deceitful and had problems with his own brother. All kinds of stories. Isaac was going to get killed by his dad, sacrificed. Not good. Not good stuff. But there it is. In black and white, between the pages of the Bible, you'll find all of these stories. And now, why would God want us to know all these things? Why would God want to document every sin that was ever committed, all the power plays that are out there, all the things that humans do wrong? Why would he put that in writing for us? I think one of the important reasons is, first and foremost, if those are some of your struggles, you're not alone. God wanted you to know that you are not alone. And as you watch how these stories unfold in the Bible, many times you'll see transformation happen within people. Yeah, they really had a problem. They really made mistakes in their lives, but often you'll see God's hand at work, and the point of those stories has always been God is involved in their lives, and good things usually work out for people, especially in the long run. That's the point, and that's why God wants to share these with you. Now, I think one of the most powerful stories, and I don't know if it's the best story or the worst story, is the story of Joseph, who came from a very dysfunctional family. Now, Joseph, I don't know if you know the story or not, he's the one that gets the fancy coat, right? And if we go back and just kind of take a snapshot of that story, Joseph gets his coat from his dad, who is that perennial liar that I was talking about, Jacob. That's his dad. Yeah, the one that didn't get along with his brother and kept trying to rob him of his inheritance, that is Joseph's dad. So Jacob is 10 taken a lot of the problems that he had in childhood and his own curriculum, and I think he brings them into his parenting as well. See, a lot of the baggage that he had, he brought it into his being a dad, and that may help explain why he would give one son this incredible coat that caused all kinds of uproar in that family. Now, Joseph was one of 12 boys in this family. And for the longest time, he was the baby of the family. So Dad kind of doted on him and made him feel special and important. And that's why I think he gave him this incredible coat. Well, of course, you got a beautiful coat like that. It's like wearing a three-piece suit. You're not going to go out in the fields and work, right? So the job that Joseph had was to kind of watch his brothers and report back to Dad what was going on. And Joseph had a big mouth on him, a tattletale. Really made his brothers irritated. He'd always go back and tell them what was up and what was happening. And the news was never uplifting. Not only did he have a big mouth, but he didn't know when to shut his mouth either because, he was a dreamer. And one day he has this incredible dream, and before even breakfast is over, he runs downstairs and he tells his brothers, hey, you'll never guess what? I had the most incredible dream you can imagine. You guys were all under my watch. You're all working for me. You all had to bow down to me. Can you imagine being an older brother and have the little one come up and say, really? I'm going to be working for you, you little whippersnapper? I don't think so. So they were irritated at their brother, angry at their brother, mad at their brother. And then one day they see him in a field way off in the distance. And they could tell because he's got this crazy looking coat on. And he's working their way towards them. And finally they've had enough of this guy. Had enough of him totally. And so they plot to kill him. Well, one of the brothers says, hey, instead of killing him, that's a bit harsh. Why don't we just throw him down a well and leave him there? Well, I don't know what the difference is. He's going to go down a well and never be found again. That's just like killing him, right? But that seemed to be their answer. And they threw him down, not just a well, but a cistern, which is a very thin well that has a big bulbous bottom. Okay, and you can't get out the top by yourself. So they wanted to throw him down there. But one of the brothers, again, says, oh, I have even a better idea. And he spots a caravan going by on its way to Egypt and says, instead of throwing him down the well where he would just die this horrible, tragic death, why don't we sell him into slavery instead and make some money out of the deal? Nice family, huh? That's what they do. Sell their brother. Now they think, that's it, they're done with this problem. Joseph's out of the picture. You can take him in his coat and see you later. Of course, it doesn't work out that way. Joseph sold into slavery, but he has some real gifts, real talents. People recognize his ability to do good things, and he starts to climb the ladder, the management ladder, so to speak. And eventually, he works himself up to being the number 2 guy in all of Egypt. He answers only to the Pharaoh himself. He's got power. I mean, big-time power, life and death power. And then God's hand is at work here, and God's providence is at work, and all of a sudden, there's this famine in the land back where he came from. And everybody's coming over to Egypt to try to get something to eat, right? And it just so happens that God puts together, again, Joseph's family and his brothers, and all of a sudden they come together. Joseph is in the perfect position to wreak revenge on his family, to muster out the punishment like never before. He could do it. He had the power. He had all the tools to do it, but he pauses. He doesn't. He doesn't destroy his family. And we learn in the very last chapter in Genesis, chapter 50, verse 20, that the perspective that Joseph has is one that we need to hear. And it says in that chapter, Joseph talking to his brothers after this happy reunion that he forgives them. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the savings of many lives. What did Joseph do there? Joseph stopped dead in its track the cycle of that would probably have continued. No, definitely would have continued if he had exacted revenge on that family. It would have destroyed that family completely. He had the power. He had the tools. And I think he even probably had the motive. But he didn't. Joseph broke the cycle. You know, when I was a youngster growing up, there was a song that some of you might have heard before. And you ever heard of the song Cats in the Cradle? Who can sing a couple of lines of that for me? The cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy turning the man of the moon. I've been coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then. That song, I grew up with that song when I was a kid, and when I hear it, it brings back memories. In fact, the song kind of haunts me a little bit, to be honest with you. And the reason why is, and if you don't know the song, I'll tell you why the song is so powerful. Because the song talks about a father that's so busy that he misses some of the important things in this little guy, most of everything that's important in this little guy's life. Misses the time that he first started to walk. He gives his son a baseball, and the kid says, "Hey, Dad, can we play ball together?" And he says, "No, son, another time, later on, sometime in the future I'll play with you." And you keep hearing this chorus repeated where he says that line. The kid asks, "Can we do something?" And the dad's always responding, "Not now, son, later. Don't know when." And the song turns 180 degrees around because the son grows up, and all of a sudden the dad wants to have a relationship with his son. Really wants to spend time with his son, but guess what the kid says back to his dad? "Sorry, Dad, I ain't got the time, and I don't know when I will." Heartbreaking song. And like I said, it kind of haunts me because there's a lot that happens in that song that's happened in my life. Now see, I have a really good dad. I had a strong foundation when I grew up. My dad was a great provider. My dad gave me an incredible work ethic. My dad taught me how to use a chainsaw and every other tool you can imagine. And I've taught every one of my children to use a chainsaw as well, including my daughter, who can wield a pretty good chainsaw. I've given my kids all the practical things that my dad has done. My kids know how to handle themselves with tools, and I continue to teach them how to use saws and all those good things. I mean, I've shared some of the good things about my dad with my kids, and I've tried to instill in them a very, very positive work ethic. But on the other hand, my dad was a person that was always distant. Maybe you can relate to this. My dad wouldn't share what was on his mind. He wouldn't share what was on his heart. He didn't tell me he loved me until he was like 70. It wasn't that he didn't. He just couldn't communicate it. And so we always have this distance between us. I never had a conversation with my dad. I never cried with my dad. I never shared life with my dad in the way I know maybe some of you have been able to, and maybe some have not. And so we talked, we communicated, but we really didn't have that relationship that I want to have with my kids. But yet, like that song, I find myself being a lot like my dad, where I'm authoritarian, where I'm telling my kids what they're doing wrong, or way more than I tell them how much I love them. I find myself getting really busy with church activities instead of spending just time hanging out. And I have to fight against it all the time. And frankly, it's gotten a lot better over the years, but I tell you, when they were growing up, I worked all the time. Yeah, all the time. Kind of like two ships passing in the night. And finally, God worked in my heart and finally started getting me to see, there's going to be some consequences. Your kids are going to turn out just the way you did if you keep this up. And you will not have the relationship that you want with your children, that you missed in your own dad. Reminds us of the story of the Bible, where Joseph turned it around. He could have. He maybe should have, but he decided not to go down that path of revenge and hatred and anger that so many people would rather choose. Instead, he broke the cycle and forgave his brothers. As the line says in here, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. You see, there are consequences for choosing the wrong behavior, choosing to pass on the wrong traits. There's going to be consequences for that, and it's really beautifully illustrated in this story from, believe it or not, that goes way back to 1874. And the story is about a director of prisons, or one of the board members of a prison, who noticed that there was like 6 family members in his prison. for different reasons, but he had 6 family members that had ended up in his prison. And so what in the heck happened to these guys? Why are all these guys in my prison? Same family, one family. So he decided to do some research, and he actually went back 150 years. So now we're talking 1724. And he discovered that the great-great-great-great-grandfather of these guys was the town bum. He was alcoholic. He was dysfunctional himself. He had low morals, and he ended up marrying a woman that no better than he was. And the one thing they did do right is they propagated lots of kids and descendants. They tracked that he had about 1,200 descendants. But what you find out how they turned out, you go wonder, wow, kind of shocking. Because of those 1,200 descendants, 310 of those were homeless. 160 of those descendants ended up being prostitutes. 180 suffered from drug or alcohol abuse. 150 were criminals, and 7 of those actually ended up murdering people. Now I want you to contrast this with another family of a very famous preacher by the name of Jonathan Edwards. This goes all the way back to 1703, and he had 1,500 descendants. But this man was a preacher, a famous preacher, a righteous man, a moral man, and not only go to church, he was the pastor of the church. And he ended up actually being the president of Princeton University. But look at the outcome of his family, 1,500 descendants. From that family, 13 were college presidents, 65 were college professors, 100 of them were attorneys. Okay, that wasn't that great, but 32 were state judges, 85 were authors of classic books, 66 were physicians, 80 held public offices, 3 were governors, and 1 ended up being the vice president of the United States. What a contrast. What a difference. A family that was broken and dysfunctional had a lineage that was really broken. While the man who married a good woman and raised his kids to love Jesus had an incredible heritage, an incredible legacy. And so we're left with a choice. Where you're left with a choice as a parent. Because I know there's not a person in here that has not been wounded at some point. There's not a person in here that has not suffered pain and discomfort in a family or a relationship. And you can either take that pain and propagate it, because there will be consequences of that, or you can take that pain and give it to Jesus and watch things change for the better. But it's a choice. It really is a choice. And it's a choice even if you're done raising your kids. You can still choose to break the cycle that so many families suffer with. You can choose to do things differently. You could choose to forgive somebody that's hurt you. And I want to give you 3 things that if you want to, write these down, because I think you should take them out of here and start using them immediately as if you exit here to make a difference in your lives. And 3 very simple things. The first is, when somebody's wounded you, somebody's hurt you, somebody's really scarred you, you need to write down specifically in black and white what it is that they've done. Because there's this thing called scope creep, which means all of a sudden that one thing happened, but all of a sudden you seem to want to incorporate everything into that anger, into that hatred, into that revenge that you might be feeling towards somebody that's wounded you. But you need to get real specific about it. Write it down and contain it. And for some people, they need to do something with it. One of the things you can do with it after you've identified what the real problem is to burn it and let it go. Joseph was good at letting things go. Joseph, in the Bible, was a person that had something happen to him. He would deal with it and then let it go. Second thing is this. Sometimes you just need to share that hurt and pain with somebody you can trust. You know, and as a part of this family here, I encourage people to come and share a problem you might have that you can't tell anybody else. That is why I'm here. I want to give you that opportunity to dump, and somebody will just listen without judging, without trying to point fingers or trying to solve all your problems. Sometimes you just need to share that. I encourage you to do that. And the third thing is to pray about it. If you're hurting and you're wounded and you're struggling and in pain, you need to give it to God through prayer. Let it go. Let it go. But then you're left with a choice. You're left with a choice still, which is to live in that pain or just start the process of making a change. Just do it. And I want to give you something to just raise you up, because I know the music has been great. God bless you for all the great music we've heard this morning, and I know I hope the Word has helped you some ways. And I want to give you something you can just hold on to, as well as those practical things. I want you to repeat after me this very simple line. Repeat after me. Lord, I am nothing without you. Make me something. Say it again. Lord, I am nothing without you. Make me something. Now say it like you mean it. Lord, I am nothing without you. Make me something. See, that's the kind of power that Jesus gives us if we let it. If we let it enter our hearts. Let's pray about that. God, thank you for this time together. We are so blessed with the children that we are having as part of this community together today. We're so blessed to be together. We're blessed that we might be enjoying a meal together and fellowship. And God, please